welcome to the Real Talk Cyber podcast. My name is Jake Seller. I'm going to be hosting the podcast today. On with us, we have Desmond Thompson and Joe Waide. Des, you want to start by introducing yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Desmond Thompson. I've spent the last 10 years of my life working as a security practitioner via product security all the way through to security leadership, which is the capacity I serve in now.
Nice, man. Joe, you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Joe Waide, about 6 years in cybersecurity, primarily as a consultant. Spent the most of my cyber life at an MSP, building out the professional services, advisory services, consulting practice there. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to hop into it.
All right, guys. My name is Jake Seller. I'm the CEO of Secure-Centric, former sales rep for Rubrik and Zscaler, so well-versed in the space and excited to join you guys today. So out of curiosity, Joe, why are we doing this, man? Want to start there? Want to tell everyone why we're doing this podcast?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about sort of where the space is going right now, there's not a lot of people giving straight, real talk about what's going on with cybersecurity and compliance. As three young guys, we feel it's our responsibility to sort of give that to you, right? Des, any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, 100%. When you think about it, like traditionally, this has been a more aged space, to say it the best way, right? So you have older ideas, you have concepts, but the reality is, man, the world of business is changing. And it's changing quickly. And I'm watching my peers, whether they be, executive level technologists or even just on the business side of it, being completely lost to all of the things that's going on, right? When you can see where business is going, where you can see where geopolitics is going and how it's going to impact the economics and bottom line, and where technology is going to fall into place, I think that it's a huge opportunity for us to really start talking through these things in a way that people probably are not accustomed to hearing, right? We can jump on these things all day. We can get super duper technical and do all those other things. But at the end of the day, the purpose of cybersecurity, and this goes down to something Jake tells us all the time, is to create peace of mind, but it's also to serve the business so the business can make money. And I think that as we continue to make these transitions, people are completely losing focus on what's actually happening. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to kind of speak some life into the space and really talk some things from a perspective most people are probably thinking, but really don't have the, place to be able to actually say it. So
It's an interesting world, man, because today you have this changing dynamic that I don't think existed before, where before cybersecurity was kind of this nice to have and you did kind of the minimum required. But all of a sudden, it seems like compliance frameworks are really pushing towards, pushing forward a lot of these cybersecurity agendas. And all these IT leaders all of a sudden are being put on the spot saying, hey, we need a cybersecurity framework in like 2 minutes, when they've been saying that message for a very long time. And so I think the timing for this podcast is great because a lot of these cyber individuals that we're interacting with every day are young guys. They're not, 40, 50-year-old guys, because a lot of those individuals, when they were doing cyber work, it was a different world where it wasn't as respected as it is today.
100%.
So I think it's great that we're doing this too, because, it's a great opportunity for us to really educate and tell the world what's going on, especially in a world where compliance, there's so many gray areas and so many unclear areas. So I'm really here just to educate, and I think we're going to do a good job at that, guys, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for it. I think this is a great opportunity, man. Super excited.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So we had a topic lined up today, and it was leadership and IT and really helping people sell to leadership, which is a problem that I get all the time in IT. Fortunately, now the dynamics changed a little bit with ISO and CMMC and some of the different frameworks coming out, where now our IT leaders have some leverage versus before it was a little bit more challenging. Joe, I'm a little curious, dude, in your experience, I mean, like, I don't know, tell us a little bit about selling IT or selling leadership with IT.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's an interesting dynamic too, because obviously the CFO, the CEO, they're thinking about risk, right? From an expense point of view. Our job as consultants and security leaders, we're also thinking about risk, but kind of in a different way. right? Um, the risk that's never or seldom considered when it comes to IT or security leaders or even, your C-suite CEOs, CFOs is really the money coming out of the business versus the money coming into the business, right? A business is there. Its purpose is to generate revenue, cut expense, make a profit, right? Um, if you're not complying, you stand to have that money leave the business, right? Not even just in fines and the audits, but you're also talking about reputation as well. And that's a big part of this. A lot of companies kind of are playing on a maybe they won't find out sort of scale, right? And that's just not a sustainable model. Des, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's so funny because I've seen this in various environments. Oh, I think it's twofold. I think that number one, the biggest gap is, and I'm going to approach this from a slightly different perspective. I think that security leaders have done a poor job at really aligning to the business strategy to actually paint that picture. Like from a security to the point, I might approach these issues and think about, oh, if we get breached, or oh, if we have an availability issue and we have an outage, right? And I can tie those things back to dollar amounts. But we have focused so much historically from a security perspective on just protecting the business that we do not become business enablers. If I were to say from a governance perspective, what are we trying to accomplish as a business? The knee-jerk reaction for most people is to initially go right into say, oh, well, we want to make money. Well, businesses, yes, that's a function of them, but businesses also have other purposes, other things that they might want to accomplish, right? They might have, a mission statement that, hey, we're going for this larger purpose. And then the financial aspect comes secondly. Security leaders, in my experience, right, and this is a lesson I've learned from watching people fall on their face. I say, I would never be that guy, is they don't think from that perspective. How do we enable the business to actually accomplish its strategy and make money while we're doing it? And addressing risk from that perspective. It's the reason why CISOs complain that they report to the CIO, the CTO, the CRO. It's the reason that they don't end up on the board of directors. It's the reason that they could never report directly to the CEO and that they don't have influence in organizations. It's because like traditional functions or verticals that align to business strategy, we don't do a good job at it. So on one side, and I agree with you, Joe, we have other leaders that are assessing risk in the business differently. My question is, why don't we assess risk and communicate the risk the way that our business stakeholders and other IT stakeholders will actually receive it? The most success I've had in my career has been when I check that check mark in my brain where I'm like, yo, listen, I can tell you because of this thing, but I can also align it back to this overarching strategy that we're trying to accomplish. And then I can pull those other things as like more of tertiary effects of those things. If we don't do this, you don't make money. If you don't do this, it becomes hard to accomplish the overall business strategy. And then here's some of those other impacts that you see on the back end, right? That
For
also
sure.
will hurt us long term too. So I just think from a security leadership perspective, we have historically not done a very good job at really being able to articulate those things and actually being able to do those things. So,
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think to that point, it's funny because, I'm the CEO of a cybersecurity company, and it's very common that, when our cybersecurity individuals are coming to me saying, hey, we want to add this thing, I'm always thinking from the perspective of, hey, how can I increase profitability? How can I increase numbers? And so a lot of the times when they're coming to me, we're almost on two different pages because they're on this page of how can I protect the business? And I'm on this page of how do I make money? And so I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of these conversations don't land, to Des's point, versus if someone were to come to me and say, hey, Jake, we need this, and this is the ROI we think we can get, or this is the operational efficiency that I think we can produce. And hey, based on that operational efficiency, these are like the dollar values that we're estimating, right? Even if it was just rough estimates, it would help me a lot from my perspective, see the world from their eyes, as opposed to this idea of, hey, this is to protect us against the 1 in 1,000 situation where we ransomware, because I'm thinking dollars and cents, probably similar to any sort of CFO. They're looking at a purchase and they're saying, hey, this is going to decrease our chance of getting hit by a ransomware. Well, by how much? and they're trying to think what percentage and how much, because they're trying to get down to the bottom line of how can I increase profitability. So I don't know, to your point, Des, I think that's a really good element where
Yeah, and you know something too, Jake, that I'm just thinking about, and I'm interested in you guys' perspective on this, right? Because I sit internal to the organizations that I lead in, right? And so those conversations for me are slightly different. I'm interested for your perspective, Jake, and from yours, Joe. The sales side coming in as a vendor, what is the most common objective you've heard from leadership? And then from your perspective, Joe, coming in to actually help those companies accomplish whatever their goal is, what are the most common issues that you guys ran into when it comes to leadership and their buy-in from that perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say the biggest thing for them is, or when we're talking about just general organizational leadership, the biggest thing for them is expense, right? And I'd say the root of that problem, and this is for any organization that's really thinking about, okay, well, what is sort of the root of this issue, right? Obviously, we could talk about the financial aspect, we could talk about, what the actual protections are, is that a lot of these organizations just don't have a security culture, right? They have a employee handbook, right, that might have some PCI DSS, clean desk policy language in it. That might have some HIPAA best practice language in it, and you sign off on it day one, and then you forget about it, right? The root of the issue and how you get everybody talking about it and how it boils up to that C-suite and how you get the CFO to sign that check is to establish a security culture, and it starts from the bottom, right? When we think about IT personnel, you're directors of IT, or you're an admin within the space. I would say one of the biggest things when it comes to getting people to feel good about something is positive reinforcement, right? Most people out there are doing, your automated security awareness programs on a monthly basis. You get those 3 phishing attempts every month. You might get a little module, a little TikTok style video, and you get a report from that, right? But you're not necessarily rewarding the individuals who are doing well with that stuff, right? And once you start building up that sort of conversation within the organization, it's naturally going to boil up to the top. It's going to make it way easier to convince your leaders, right, to get on board with security.
But Joe, I mean, do you think it's a bottom up approach or like a top down approach when it comes to building a security culture?
Well, it's gonna start with the IT and security personnel, right? And really getting those individuals getting alignment. And I always say there's strength in numbers, right? So there's typically one director of IT, and there's multiple security personnel or IT personnel, right? So that director of IT might have this idea in theory, but most security practitioners from you're just IT admin, or you might be monitoring and doing a remote monitoring management, right? Just kind of working in a SOC maybe. You're there because you're passionate about what you do typically, right? Take those numbers, take your passion, and that should be a message that you bring to every single meeting, right? And then that starts to permeate throughout the organization. Once you start getting those, again, strength in numbers, once you start getting the sort of, and I'm not going to call them the bottom, but necessarily your typical personnel is the word I'll use. Once you start expanding your ideas across the organization, I've seen in practice that this starts to boil up. At my previous organization, which was an MSP, you saw salespeople start to send messages to us saying, "Hey, do you think this is fishy?" Right? And that's not coming from their sales managers. That comes from, "Hey, well, I work with Joe on a daily basis, or I've communicated with Joe, and I've learned a lot about security just from my talks with Joe." Right? So I'm going to start, and it's kind of a subconscious psychological trick, if you will. You might even want to call it a psyop, but it starts to bury in their subconscious that, hey, this is a very serious thing, right? Because they get people coming to them every single day saying, "Hey, protection, protection, protection," and then when they see an expert sitting next to them reinforcing their fears, right, that starts to permeate. It could be a top down approach as well, but you're not going to see that in organizations that are already fighting against getting into compliance mode or purchasing security solutions. So I think that there's strength in the people, right? For the people.
I got an opinion on this, but Des, do you want to go first on your 2 cents?
Yeah, no, I think that the biggest thing I always tell people, right? And this is so funny because it's always reinforced. The biggest strength and weakness of every security program are people. It is what it is. It's the person, we used to call it Uncle Bob, that clicks the phishing link because he just wants to see what happens. I remember one time, I'll give you guys a fun fact. I remember one time we pushed out a phishing campaign. It was my first time doing it at this organization I went to. We had a senior level executive that said he clicked the link because he wanted to see what was going to happen.
Yep.
People, right? Like legit, we'll leave them, we'll let them live, right? But then on the other side, when people buy into the culture of security, right? And it becomes one of those things where leadership reinforces it, then you start to really make progress with it. Another thing that I think that from a security leadership perspective that you have to adjust to is when we start going into these environments and we're looking at how do we continue to add capability without maturing the things that we already have? I tell people all the time, in most situations, like security awareness and actually getting people in front of these problems, that a lot of times is very, 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 very low in cost, right? And people will pay an obscene amount of money or propose an obscene amount of money for a tool, right? And it'll be overlap with another tool versus actually taking the time to say, how do we educate people? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. You're educating the day-to-day team member that's trying to work, that's trying to just do their job, to do a good job because they're trying to complete a business process. And then on the other end, you have the executive that doesn't understand the value of it. They don't see it, right? And so you want to take that time and educate them on, hey, this is what the impact can be if the worst case scenario materializes, and make it more tangible for them. We used to see in one of the organizations I worked in previously, when we did tabletop exercises, that was the thing that kind of opened people up to it, because we would build these exercises with the actual systems in place, realistic, using the subject matter expert to say, this is how my system could be compromised, right? And then you sit in front of the leadership team and say, this is the issue. Now they're like, yo, my team can't do work. Yo, we would lose, $20 million a day. Yo, we would do that. Now it opens up in their mind of, okay, what are we going to tell the news? What are we going to tell the media? What are we going to, and that consistent training of personnel and people to get their minds focused on it is super duper critical as well. So go for it, Jake. I know you have thoughts.
I think there's going to be, to simplify building a security culture, I think there's really just one person in the entire organization that needs to get bought in, that you have to sell. And I would say that one person is the leader. Like if you can sit down with the CEO or get FaceTime with the CEO at some point and really sell him on what it means to build a security culture and the ROI that you're going to see by having a security culture, the additional contracts you're going to receive by having a security culture, and you can quantify the outcomes of building a security culture. If you sell your CEO, you don't have to sell anyone else, because all of a sudden now you have the most powerful salesman of all time for your entire organization, who's making all of his decisions through a single lens, and that's the CEO. And so from my perspective, I think that building a security culture is top down. Like if you don't have CEO buy-in, you can have department head buy-in, and you're still going to run into issues and bottlenecks long term. Because what can happen is those department heads may be bought in, but then they're going to go to the CEO for big decisions, and the CEO isn't going to be making those decisions from that security culture lens. And so I think that that's really the one person you need to sell inside of an organization, is really the CEO.
I can get behind that in and in a lot of respects. I think one of the issues that you run into, especially with small to medium sized businesses, is that they see some of the security practices that are being enforced by the CEO as just a pain in the ass, so to speak, right? And this, to Des's point, this is where the human security problem starts to come into play. And I know insider threat might be a different topic for a different day, but I've seen a lot of situations where, CEOs or CFO or whomever, president is enforcing all of these security practices, right? thinking that they're doing the right thing, and they are, right? From our perspective, they are doing the right thing. However, you have to worry about the X amount of people that are working under that CEO, right? And those people, and like to your point, Jake, to those people, they don't care about this stuff, right? At least at this point in the scenario that we're talking about, they don't care about this stuff. And so you start to see some, callous deviations from the security practice. And that's just thinking from a risk management point of view. And that's what my job is, to consider risk all the time, be paranoid for the sake of other companies. That's something that I would certainly consider. I agree. The fish is going to stink from the head down if you don't have a security practice or a security culture from the head down. I agree with that 100%. Of course, you have to be tactful about it, right? We just don't want to come in and change usability for the purpose of changing usability. You want to make sure that security culture is fostered from a place of, this is going to make all of us better, right? I'll digress from that. Des?
Yeah. No, one of the things I think, so there's two things. I think that talking about security culture is something huge opportunity, something huge for us to talk about. But I think let's change gears in this regard. Let's talk about the solution. Let's gear up for some solutions. All right, so we have a executive team that is not bought in, right? I have my thoughts on how do you approach that issue, but I want to know from you guys' perspective, because I'm that security leader, right, that has to go do it. I want to know from you guys' perspective, how do you guys think that conversation happens? And then I'll tell you what really happens. How about that?
All right, you want to go first, Joe? I'll go after he gives you feedback.
I kind of heard that as a rhetorical question.
I'm setting you guys up, man. I'm setting you guys up. It's all
right. Put me on the spot, dude. You go first.
Well, what I do know, just from being on sales calls and all of that, and I'm not really looking at this from the point of view of probably where you come from, Des. I'm thinking about the small to medium sized market security leaders, and a lot of times they're not necessarily security leaders; they're compliance officers or IT directors, if you will. Right? Security isn't really the forefront of their brain. When we talk about these compliance frameworks, the IT directors are focused on the more technical aspects of it. The compliance people are they know HIPAA, right? They know they have to comply with HIPAA, but everything else in between doesn't really matter to them. What I've experienced, especially with the small to medium sized businesses, is that they are reluctant to really progress that conversation again. And I keep coming back to this, from an expense point of view, right? And what the gap is a lot of times is those IT directors are afraid to approach anybody, right? And it's kind of like it's almost like a primal fear. It's like they've already known they've already known what the issues were. They've already known the tools that they need to implement. They know from a general point of view what compliance or what standards that they need to comply with from a compliance point of view. But they are absolutely terrified to approach the decision makers to say, hey, CFO, you need to sign off on this, or else something bad is going to happen, right? Same thing, and I'm talking, that's from an IT director standpoint. Same thing with the compliance officer standpoint, right?
So how would you do it, Joe?
How would I do it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that was the question.
Stop dodging the question, Joe. How would you do it?
I mean, really, and I keep coming back to the same point. In order for somebody who's going to spend money to sign off on any sort of project that relates to IT security, you have to expand on the fact that they stand to have money leaving the business rather than coming into the business. So that's the position that I stand on with every single client that has this issue, right? And we talked about it before. We talked about the fines that they can incur, right? And especially the reputation. If you, and I get Des's point where it's sort of twofold. It's not just about the business; it's also about the mission. But at the end of the day, these CEOs are trying to generate revenue, right? And a lot of times that's why they're coming to you. They want to get the contracts. If, depending on their certification, they want that certification so that they can get a new book of business. But in order to get that new book of business, you have to ensure that there's no margin of error for money to leave the organization. Does that answer the question, Jake? Or does that answer the question, Des?
Yeah, we're approaching. Again, this is just perspective. Because I think a lot of times when you come from a consultant perspective or a sales perspective, the way these conversations happen are slightly different. And for you to be successful, I've seen people have these conversations and they approach it from a dollar and cents thing. Oh, well, this is how much money we spend to do this currently in this manual. This is how much money we'll spend if we automate it, right? And that's the baseline that they operate from. The right way, going back to
Wait, before you say it, Des, can I take this one a shot?
Yeah, go for it.
Give me your thoughts on this method. So you basically have one meeting with all the core leadership team, so core stakeholders of each department, right? And in that meeting, you explain in detail what the specific initiative is as it relates to security, and what are the desired outcomes of it. So and you quantify it. And so you basically sell the executive team on what security is going to do for the company for the profitability standpoint, to Des's point. After you do that, you pre-create a roadmap and a strategy to ultimately accomplish those objectives. And you have all the executives sign off on the strategy. And now you have in many senses, a charter that you can use throughout the entire organization to fulfill on your objectives. So you can say, hey, this was signed by so-and-so. We need to do this. And then at least inside of those conversations, you can show that you have upper level buy-in to make progress and momentum, and you don't have people pushing back.
That's solid. That's solid. I love it. But the way both of you guys are thinking, they're both right? So I'm going to tell you what has been super successful for me, whether it be starting up a program, whether it's jumping in and, trying to take over a program that already exists and enhancing it. The first thing I tell and this is going to be one of those things everyone's going to say, what? The first thing that you should always do as a security leader is bathe in your business. And that is something people are reluctant to do. That is something IT leaders are reluctant to do. When I say bathe in your business, how do we make money? That's the first question. To your point, Joe, how is it that technologists or security leaders go say, oh, let me show you how we're going to not take money out the business when they don't understand we make money, right? Let's go in, let's sit down, go to those executive leaders that you said. No, go to them individually first. Figure out what their business processes actually are. Think about their pain points. Think about their issues, right? Hear them out and understand what is actually going on knee deep in the business. Your first 30, 60, 90 days should be you learning and understanding your business first, right? From there, you're also understanding the mission and the vision of the organization holistically. Now I have something as I start to go through. People gain credibility because no one has ever come to me to say, what are my pain points? Hey, when this system goes down, we have this. Oh, wow, I wonder why that is. Well, we don't have any type of asset management to understand where all of these other dependencies are. So when this goes down, like 3 other things go down, that creates my application to go down, right? Understanding the resiliency risk and all those additional things. When you don't understand that, and unfortunately, most security leaders do not try to understand those things, you're automatically wrong because now you're coming with dollar cent. And here's the thing, Joe, the point of challenge I will always give to the dollar cents method is, guess what? And Jake understands this too. Well, how about instead of doing that, if I pay X, Y, and Z amount of extra dollars in the marketing, I can accrue more business, and versus you saying that it's going to take something out. That's the real mindset that if I'm a CEO or CFO, I'm thinking, why don't I become more proactive? Here's another thing. Organizations, when they assess risk, they also look at it and say, the fine is $10 million, but we can make $100 million. Oh, that's a business decision that I don't think is going to be too hard, right? And that's where a lot of security and IT leaders fail because that's the arguments they go in with. They're not thinking like a business leader. They're thinking as just their vertical. And for us to be successful, bathe in the business, understand how we make money, understand those pain points. Once you do that, now you can go to the CEO and to everyone else, and you can tell them, this is my philosophy. You evangelize them one by one, so that when you get to this larger meeting with all of the stakeholders, you've already fleshed out all of your objections. Any issues that they are going to have, they've already laid it out. I didn't like the way that the last CISO did this. The last CISO never talked to him. Every single time we had this issue over here, he was never available for this. He never thought through this. He only focused on this. And now you understand those things. So now when you do go and you build out an overall charter to establish your program, because let's be clear, when we're talking about establishing a charter, we're talking about establishing governance at the highest level. Now I'm able to get buy-in, because in building all these things, I have already assessed all of those additional components and pain points that people actually care about. And I can align those things into how my security program is going to fine tune and help solve some of those issues. Now we can start getting into the other things. This is how we align to the business. All right, cool. Now everyone sees you as a business leader. You have instant credibility. That's what keeps people reaching out to you on every day. Hey, Des, what do you think about this? Now you're involved in those conversations. Historically, they left you out of internally, right? From a consultant perspective and the sales perspective, you don't see the security leader that gets left off of very upfront conversations you would think they would be in on. But that's because they don't establish themselves as an actual business leader and as an add to the business. They're just saying, hey, we'll save you money by doing this. Nah. This is how we enhance the business. Once you do that, now you can build out your information security policy, understanding how the business operates, right? So you understand those things, and then your security escalation flow and all the other things that you do, you'll be able to reestablish those things and fine tune it. But it all starts from bathing in the business. The reality is when I step into a new organization as a security leader, that first 30, 60, 90 days is I'm understanding what's going on with the team. I'm trying to see how involved we are with the business. The moment that I see that we are a function of IT, the moment I say I have not had a single conversation with anyone from the business in the last 30 days, I automatically know we are in an unhealthy security environment. Instantaneously. I already know that's where we are, right? But when you haven't seen that, a lot of times people don't understand those nuances that you need to be successful. And if you work that flow, you're going to gain credibility, and everything that you propose, people are going to be open to, because they understand your mindset as the security leader is about enabling the business and protecting the business, that dual mandate that we have there. And so, no, that's my thoughts, man. It's been extremely successful for me. I've watched CISOs, I've watched directors of IT, directors of InfoSec, CIOs fail. And that has essentially refine-tuned my understanding of how it works. And I'm also glad that as a security leader, I didn't jump straight into security off the bat. I had that business experience to understand those nuances.
So I think, and I know that. Screw the time. I think we're looking at this really from
like 5 more minutes just to really nail this one in, because this is a good point, Des.
Yeah, I think what's interesting too is how we're talking about this specific topic, right? And it kind of feels like it's coming from a rather singular lens, right? We're talking about CEOs, CISOs, CFOs. What about organizations that don't have that infrastructure, right? What about like those 10-person organizations, right? That still have compliance needs, still have security needs, but they have a president and everybody is just under the president, right? But they still have everything that we just talked about. They still have to comply with that level of compliance, right? And I'm speaking about, so there's, especially in the financial industry, there's something called the FTC Safeguards rule, right? And we built at my previous company an entire program around the FTC Safeguards rule. And really that the compliance with that rule is based on the amount of consumer records that you have, right? So if you have if you could be a 3-person shop, but if you maintain or in your, data retention mechanisms, you have over 5,000 consumer records, you have to do a lot of shit. Right. And it doesn't matter if you're a 10-person shop. It doesn't matter if you're, a 500-person shop. There's no in between. There's no, muddy water there. It's pretty cut and clear. So when we're thinking about convincing security leaders from that perspective, right, and we're going to take it from the 10-person shop. Des, what would you think would be the best way to approach that conversation?
I love it. The best way to approach that conversation is still going back to those 10 people understanding how they do their jobs. No matter how big, no matter how small, I will emphasize this to the end of the world. And this is something, and I'm saying it out loud, and most people will never do it because they do not feel comfortable going to someone saying, teach me how you do what you do. Because guess what? If I go to that 10-person team and we have Susie, we have Emily, and we have Joe, Joe, it's so easy to use your name. But if we have those 3 people and they have a manual process, now I have the opportunity to say, hey, listen, we can enhance our security posture, our compliance needs, and we can automate their workflow. And this is what we're going to have to partner together to do that thing. Now I just enabled the business. I just made those people's lives 1,000 times easier. They're going to love me. And I just made us more secure. But if I don't understand that workflow, guess what I'm going to turn around and do? I'm going to go around the corner and I'm going to say, all right, no, these are the things we need to do to comply. And then I'm going to, and this is the world most security leaders fall in, and I'm going to tell everybody else what they need to go do. And those people are sitting there like, this is so unrealistic. Do you know how I do my job? And it's like, yeah, well, but we got to do what we got to do. And this is what the policy says. And so now you have people trying to fit that into it versus, hey, this is where the business is. This is what we need to develop and work together so that we can enable the business and protect it. If you're a director of IT, if you are a CISO, if you are an information security manager, whichever world you fall in, the mindset has to be the same. It has to be cool. How do people do their job? How can I enable them to actually be more efficient, more effective at that job, and do it securely? The best security is security people don't see. It's engineered already into the process. And the best way to engineer it into the process is actually to automate workflows and make people's lives easier.
It's so true, Dad. Like, I think most IT people that I interact with, not all of them, are trying to solve problems with a variable that, they're trying to solve problems without a very important variable. And that's, what is the impact on the business, or how is this going to improve the business? Simply because they're not taking the time to learn the business.
Yep.
So whenever they're solving problems, they're just solving it. They're surface level problems.
Yes.
That situation, Joe, like what I was telling you with, the CMMC guy who's, doing VDI, right? He's jumping straight to a VDI solution. And,
right.
He's only been there for a couple months, right? And if you don't understand the business and how that's going to impact all the different individuals that are going to have to use that VDI solution and their processes, you could be creating a huge bottleneck to the business, right? For example, now everyone has to log into VDI, which takes a bunch of time. Maybe VDI doesn't operate at the same speed. Now all of a sudden you have 20 employees who are getting 30% less work done. Okay, what's the ROI on that? And so I think that that's a critical component, especially in the SMB, that IT leaders just aren't paying attention to when they're solving problems. They're focusing on the technical solutions instead of the business solutions.
You don't know how many times I've heard the term, we're a break fix shop, right? Something, right? I'm sure you guys have heard that 1,000 times, right? You talk to internal IT, you talk to internal IT people, and you're like, so what proactive actions have you taken here? Oh no, we're a break fix shop. We're reactive, and I think
we're agile too. That's another one.
Yeah. It's a fast-paced, agile environment. Yeah, absolutely. Lean environment, right? I love it. Yeah. But I think to both of your points, I think one of the biggest takeaways from all of that is the general reluctancy to be proactive in all this, right? And proactivity in a lot of these cases is just starting with the basics, right? Especially, and we're going to keep on the SMB scope here. To that specific example, Jake, yes, that's 100% jumping the gun. There's absolutely no reason for that right now, and we find that a lot of times with SMBs, right? You talk to them like, hey, so like, tell me a little bit about your EDR solution or what you're doing to protect your endpoints, and they have a quote from some vendor with 1,000 different mechanisms that's built into that quote and service level, and it's like, but do you really need that right now? right?
And to your point, Joe, as coming in as a security leader, I can't tell you, especially for those smaller and between companies, even large companies, I'll be honest with you, where you walk in the door and it's not turned on. They
Right.
have an IPS
Yeah.
and it's not turned on. They have all this functionality they don't even know that they have because they only need it to solve one problem. And then you looking like, yo, but we're paying for all of these other modules in this solution and nobody's even turned it on or configured it. So it's like, and then you complain about costs when you just literally spent an extra $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 and to not use half of the stuff.
Exactly, 100%. I mean, default configurations aside, a lot of the times when they're purchasing solutions, it is just to show that they have the solution, right? The full functionality of what they can do to protect their data is just not there, and they haven't looked into it, right? I mean, how many times have Des, especially going through assessments, when we talk about baseline configurations, how often do you see an actual baseline configuration from some of these clients? Very rarely. Very rarely. There's no uniform practice. There's no really visibility from their perspective, even though they can obtain visibility if they took the time and again cared about the business and how the data flows. There could be visibility, but it's just not there yet. Start with the basics, and I'll stop there.